It's time for my favourite video to film. That is DJ Q&A, answering your DJ related questions that you have been sending in via my YouTube community post and also as well on Instagram. Let's get straight into the questions. So first up, let's go through the YouTube community post questions that have been sent in. First question, in no particular order: who is your favourite music artist and have you ever considered or tried producing your own music? Second part of the question, yes I have. I have made quite a few little mashups and also as well made a couple of remixes and a couple of tracks with a good friend of mine, Sam, a few years ago. It is probably something that I would like to get more involved with. It's a case of finding the time. Like, I work a day job, I also DJ, I make these YouTube videos. So production is one of those things where it's actually quite hard, in my opinion, to master the software. You need a lot of time, a lot of patience. And it's something that I've just never devoted enough time to. So maybe again in the future at some point. In terms of the first part of the question, my favourite music artist, there's far too many artists that I absolutely love. I can't narrow it down to one because I like such a broad range of music. If we're talking DJs, I like a lot of house orientated DJs. So people like Bob Sinclair, David Penn, Dennis Ferreira. I really like Eats Everything. He's not always just house, he can play an absolute mixture of everything, but he's a really talented guy, I think, in my opinion. Again, not house, but Ben Hemsley's absolutely smashing it at the moment. In terms of other artists that I absolutely love, I'm a massive fan of Elvis Presley, really randomly. I love rock and roll. I like Michael Jackson, Queen. So yeah, quite a broad range of artists really. So I can't give you one, unfortunately. On to the next question. What's the best way to deal with people that are not very nice to you being the DJ? Had someone come up to me Saturday night asking for drum and bass in the party room. 10 times he came up. I ended up being quite rude to him. Whoops. I think the problem is people being rude is just part and parcel of being in any kind of customer facing role. I look at like supermarkets, people get abuse on the checkouts for being slow. There's always people out there that are not going to be nice if you are in like a public facing role. It is probably made worse by the fact that in the environments that you're working in, where we're DJing, you've got alcohol into the mix and other substances which we won't get into. I think the best way to deal with these kind of things is, especially if someone comes up 10, 20 times, is don't change what you're saying. Be very assertive and keep it as short as possible. So if, for example, this guy, in your instance, you're playing in the party room and he's asking for drum and bass, and there is another room playing that type of music, and just say, this isn't the room for that, you need to go next door, and that's it. And then if he comes up again, just keep it to the same message over and over again. That's the only thing you can do. I think that's not being rude. That is just being assertive and standing your ground. There's always going to be unreasonable people, and you can't reason with the unreasonable, in my opinion. So just be assertive and be as short and direct as possible, in my opinion. That's not being rude. On to the next question then. Are big super clubs a thing of the past, more and more closing down by the day? So I don't know where you're watching from, but here in the UK, this is definitely a big problem, especially on the high street. So back in the day when I started out as a DJ, there were you'd go out into a big town centre and there'd be 2 or 3 nightclubs, and one of which would hold a good few thousand people, and that is not the case for many towns now, unfortunately. I think super clubs as a concept are certainly not a thing of the past in the right location. So for example, I've just come back from Ibiza. Check out my vlog in the description down below if you haven't seen it. But the clubs over there are thriving. If anything, they're a little bit too busy. However, in my opinion, they're innovating because they're putting on really good lineups. It's a different night every week. Every night, the venue almost goes through a complete transformation. So you could go to the same nightclub 3 nights in a row and it would be completely different each time. And that is the innovation of the clubs over there. They're definitely investing a lot of money. They have state-of-the-art light, state-of-the-art sound. It's second to none. I think where the UK and the super clubs on the high street potentially are a thing of the past, but it's because they have had very little investment for so long. And it's got to a point where you go to these super clubs and it's a case of the doors are open and they're almost just expecting people to turn up. I think these businesses need to innovate. I think if you are selling the nightclub or the area as an event space, and you're putting on a specific event with a specific lineup, and you put on a full venue transformation, then I think it could do well. You know, there's many clubs in London that are still thriving, like Studio 338. Ministry of Sound is still there. I know Printworks has just shut down, but there is a replacement for that, the Beams it's called. And these venues seem to be doing well, but the difference between that and the high street is that they're putting on specific events, they're putting on big lineups with big DJs, so it almost gives people a reason to come. Simply throwing open the doors and playing top 40 tunes and expecting like 2,000-3,000 people to come in this day and age, I think is a thing of the past. On to the next question, and this one's kind of linked to the one I've just answered. Are clubs struggling because 19 to 20-year-olds missed out on their clubbing initiation? I'm guessing this is linked to lockdown and the fact that a lot of people that turned 18, 19 during lockdown perhaps potentially hadn't experienced night clubbing before. I actually think it's not a case of missing out on the clubbing initiation. I actually think the way we socialise now is very, very different. If I think back to when I was 18 and 19, you'd finish work or uni or whatever it was, and at the end of the week, you would all go out to a club and you'd meet friends and you'd speak to friends that you hadn't spoken to all week, and you'd kind of drink, dance, have a laugh, etc. Nowadays, I think one of the biggest contributors to clubs struggling is mobile phones. People are glued to their phone screens, and I generally think the art of socializing face to face is actually kind of fading a little bit. If you go to like any of these festivals, any of these big super clubs, there's so many people just filming the night on their phones rather than living and enjoying the moment, which for me is a massive shame. It's more about how good you look on Instagram, how good you look on social media, rather than just being in the moment and living and having a great night with your friends, regardless of the music, in my opinion. So I think as a result of people hiding behind a screen, the lack of socializing via face-to-face, I think people now are going out a lot less. I also think as well, festivals seem to be massively on the increase. Ibiza seems to be very, very popular this year. So I think rather than going and spending 20, 30 quid in your local high street nightclub that's playing chart and top 40, people would much rather save up a bit of money and pay for more of an experience that they're not going to get when you just go down to your local nightclub. So I think that's probably why certain venues are struggling. It's all about innovation, in my opinion. And yeah, it is a bit of a shame, but I think things are just shifting a little bit now. And then final question for today, bit of a shorter Q&A. Should DJs be expected to bring their own equipment, decks, controllers, etc.? I assume you mean to a nightclub rather than a mobile gig, because of course on a mobile gig you are expected to bring everything. In my opinion, absolutely not. I think if you're booked to DJ in a nightclub, they should have industry standard equipment in the DJ booth that is fully operational and fully maintained. If you are a pro nightclub DJ, in my opinion, you should know how to use industry standard equipment. I mean CDJs and a mixer. That is my own opinion. If you haven't used CDJs and a mixer before, try and get yourself into the venue a bit earlier so you can get used to them. Most controllers, especially if it's a Pioneer controller, you should be able to make that transition quite easily. In terms of like the expectation, a lot of nightclubs now who expect DJs to bring their own equipment, it's because DJs have probably brought their own equipment in the past. Therefore, the club now thinks, oh, I don't need to supply anything because our DJs just bring them. Ultimately, that equipment that you are bringing costs you a lot of money, and I bet you that venue is not charging you a higher fee for your equipment. And it's a real issue if you're DJing in a DJ booth that's fairly open, customer comes over, requests a song, spills their drink all over your equipment, that controller or whatever it is breaks. Let's face it, that nightclub is not going to be repairing or replacing your equipment for you. My biggest pet hate is when a club has a fully functional and operational CDJ setup and the DJ comes in and plonks their controller on top of the existing setup. That's absolutely ridiculous. And if clubs are seeing this, then why would they supply equipment? But yes, in a nutshell, DJs should not be expected to bring their own equipment. The club should be supplying it, and it should be well maintained as well. And there we have it, some of your DJ related questions answered. Thank you so much to everyone that sent in a question. Do keep updated with my YouTube community post for when I next film one of these videos if you have any questions that you would like me to answer. Be sure to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and check out that video up there next.